The forest on the west coast does not hurry. Rimu and Miro rise through mist, Nikau fronds drip with last night's rain, and the limestone underneath keeps its private architecture of caves and sinkholes. On a cool April morning in 1995, a group of Polytechnic students walked the track above Cave Creek, a narrow chasm where water spoke in echoes. They were out to see how parks work: tracks, signs, structures, a field day inside the living classroom of Paparoa National Park. Their tutor pointed out slips and karst features. Near the end of the trail stood a viewing platform built to lean over the void, a small balcony on nature's cathedral. The deck seemed solid. Timber beams, a waist-high balustrade, a view worth a postcard. The students stepped onto the boards, talking, laughing, nudging for a better angle. Someone heard a crack, soft, unimportant, the kind wood makes as it adjusts to weather. Someone else felt the deck shift half an inch. The tutor raised a hand to say, one at a time, the sensible rule you say even when you're sure it's belt and braces. Then the sounds changed. Not the sharp snap of a broken spar, but a tired sigh, as if the structure had been holding its breath for months and chose that moment to let it go. Nail heads lifted from timber like silver eyes. A joist sagged, then another. The deck rolled forward, and the balustrade went down with a clatter of staples, the whole platform peeling off its mountings and diving into the chasm as if it had been hinged there all along. Falling is a long story told very fast. Some reached for air and found none. Some clawed at the dirt lip and felt it crumble. A student grabbed a friend's sleeve and lost it. The deck hit limestone ledges on the way down, breaking into a geometry of splinters. Bodies followed. The creek caught timber and lives together in a shock of white water and brown bark. Silence was not immediate. It arrived after scattered shouts, and the last tumbling boards settled. Ferns shook out dust. The trees, as trees do, continued being trees. On the rim, a few who had not stepped onto the platform screamed for help, then realized there was no one near enough to hear. The area was remote, the radio coverage patchy. One student ran back down the track to the car park, feet slamming a cadence that would mark that wilderness in memory forever. Others climbed carefully along a goat's path to reach the bottom, where the creek ran shallow over pale stone. They found classmates breathing in hiccups, or not breathing at all, faces already turned toward a different light. Someone counted. Someone else started compressions. The tutor turned his shirt into a bandage and talked to a girl with a broken leg, saying nonsense so she would keep him company in the world. The call finally reached the Department of Conservation Base, then the police, then the local ambulance and helicopter crews. Pilots lifted off in wind that can knife down gullies. Search and rescue volunteers who had known each other since school threw on packs and headed for a point on the map that had never needed them until now. They found the chasm threaded with rope and voices, a vertical place made horizontal by the broad back of a community that refused to let weight keep its secrets. Stretcher after stretcher went up through green air. The helicopter thumped its rotor song against the limestone walls. On the surface, paramedics worked on the living and closed the eyes of the dead. In all, 13 people died. 4 survived to tell the part we always want to leave out and cannot, that they lived because when the world broke, someone kept moving and refused to stop. News outpaced the mist. By nightfall, New Zealand knew the name of a creek most had never heard. Photographs showed the split posts at the cliff edge like ribs. A reporter looked into the lens and used the words catastrophic failure, which were true but insufficient. The next morning, officials arrived with clipboards and authority. The shock had a shape. The reasons would take time. Investigators unrolled the story, not from the moment of collapse, but from the first sketch on a desk years earlier. The platform had been built without a building consent. There were no approved drawings stamped by an engineer. There had been, at best, a set of sketches, and an understanding that a structure like this was routine. The ledger board that anchored the deck to the cliff face had been nailed rather than bolted. Joist hangers were missing, or were makeshift. The timber used where rain and shade worked, their slow chemistry had not been treated for that kind of life. Fastenings that would have mattered had been postponed or replaced by others that looked similar to the untrained eye. Staff had been short, budgets had been tight, priorities had been ordered by urgent track slips and storm cleanups and the ceaseless list any ranger carries in a pocket notebook. The platform stood anyway, because wood holds until it doesn't. The inquiry dug deeper and found a culture. Good people working hard inside a system that normalized shortcuts as kindnesses to time. Training for carpentry and engineering tasks was more often learned by watching than by certification. Paperwork was a cart pushed ahead of a horse and sometimes left behind entirely because the horse wouldn't wait. There had been warnings in other places, the odd loose board, a cracked bearer, each fixed by a hammer and intent, none risen to the level of the law. The report did not say that fate had hunted those students. It said the structure had been set on a path the day a nail went where a bolt should have been, and that every day after that, moisture, rot, and gravity extracted a fee. Families came to the creek with flowers and with the awful patience required at funerals where youth has been interrupted. They met searchers who now looked like sleepwalking men. They met officials who had replaced their field clothes with suits and phrases cut close to the bone. A parent picked up a fragment of timber and turned it over like a question he would be asking the rest of his days. A classmate came back months later and sat on the new bench above the rebuilt track and said the names to the bush, so the bush would keep them. The government moved, slow, then fast. Heads of departments took responsibility in front of cameras, then left those jobs. The law grew new teeth. Consents and inspections became not suggestions, but thresholds. The department rewrote its way of doing business where the public might stand on timber or steel. Every structure would be designed or checked by a competent engineer. Every bolt and bracket would be drawn and listed. Every ledger would be fixed with a fastening you could number, not guess. A national code for visitor structures was born, dry on the page and vital in the field. Audits became routine and boring, as good safety always is. The words Cave Creek turned into a shorthand inside offices and on tracks, uttered quietly when someone proposed a shortcut, a reminder that the cost of saving time is sometimes paid by people who never saw the invoice. The site itself changed in a way that time knows best. A new platform rose, built in steel, bolted until the designers were tired of counting, then counted again. The new structure stands back from the lip, as if still wary of the place that took. Signs tell what happened in simple language. School groups come and read and look down at the creek where it threads the limestone like a seam. Some step onto the platform and are reassured by its solidity. Others stop short and choose the safe earth. Grief made into knowledge is still grief, but it can hold weight. Ask those who were there which moment they carry. Many will tell you about the sound before the fall, the tired sigh of fastening surrender. Others will tell you about the helicopter's return and the way strangers' hands felt certain on a stretcher's handles. A ranger might mention a ring binder full of inspection reports, heavy as atonement, and say he is grateful for the weight. A builder on another side of the world might hold a bolt up to light and think of a creek he has never seen and tighten the nut one more quarter turn, not for perfection, but for the memory of those 13. What lasts is not the scandal or the headline's heat. It is the habit carved out of anger and sorrow. Plan, check, sign, check again. Train the people who lift hammers. Never let good enough be the last note written in a ledger. In classrooms where tomorrow's rangers and engineers learn the shape of their work, Cave Creek is not a ghost story. It is a lesson with diagrams and a roll call. The list of names is not an appendix. It is the first page. Stand on the new deck and feel the steel take your weight and carry it clean into rock. The creek speaks its soft geology below. The bush goes about its patient business. The air tastes of salt from far-off surf and leaf resin and rain. Nothing about the scene announces catastrophe unless you already know. That, too, is a lesson. Most failures look ordinary until they introduce themselves. Most tragedies begin with a small wrong choice that waits for its moment. The students set out that morning to learn how parks work. In the end, they taught a country how safety must. The repair they purchased with their lives is the kind you cannot see in a single place. It runs through checklists on wind-blown ridgelines, through procurement forms on rainy Tuesdays, through toolbox talks where someone says, "Let's do it right, because Cave Creek." The forest does not hurry, but people can, and they can also decide to slow down where slowing down is the difference between a lookout and a fall. Thank you for listening to Road to Ruins. Subscribe for more true stories where systems fail and people pay the price.